welcome to week 22 of the chronological. That still sounds really crazy. We didn't get halfway yet, but we are at week 22, and this week what we were going to look at, part of the Song of Solomon was in last week's reading, and then the other half is in this week's. And so this week, what I want to kind of deal with is the book of Song of Solomon, which I knew what I wanted to teach all week, and here's the problem. You know you're coming here to teach this, and I'm going to have women, and then I go to Bolivar and Memphis, I'm going to have men, and at the same time, I also know I'm not going to be talking to, junior high girls or junior high boys, okay? And so at this point in our life, we've all probably screwed this up already, okay? And so when you're talking about that, it doesn't change the fact that truth of Scripture's here, and we're going to put it out there. But at the same time, one thing we do know is God is not only a forgiving God, but He also can restore the years the locust has eaten. So out of all of it, as we look at this and what this is, just remember there is the fact that God can restore, will bring us back around. But the reality is we need to know what God's picture is when it comes to marriage and the marriage relationship to move forward with, because, well, God thought enough to put this whole book here. Now, who wrote this thing? Well, Solomon. All right, and it's called, some call it the Song of Songs. Some call it the Song of Solomon. And it really is, you kind of have to look at it in a couple of different ways. These are, by most theologians' breakdown, these are like multiple different songs that are in this. And, in our world, you have what? You've got verses and a chorus, and when you look at that, you don't see verses and then a chorus. So, but in one aspect there, and it's not a chronological reading, so it's not like that you start and here's day one and it kind of jumps back and forth. And that's, if you remember the way albums at least used to be, instead of just, one song here or there. But when they, remember how they used to do albums, they kind of had a theme, right? But all this theme didn't go and follow one direct path, did it? It could be kind of different time periods, different thoughts, but there was still kind of a theme of the album. That's kind of how you have to look at this. The other way you kind of have to look at it is Solomon is writing this, and it's almost like he's a romance novelist. Okay? In our day, romance novelists, most are women, but there are men romance novelists. Now, just because they're romance novelists doesn't mean their life really reflects what they write, does it? It's just this, what's in their head, and they're writing out there. Maybe it's their ideal. And I think Solomon's a really, really good test with that, because what he's going to write here and what his real life is are really two different things, okay? I mean, he's going to be talking about a husband and wife relationship, basically kind of the two become one. But at the reality of his life, by the time you get to the end of his life, he's got 700 wives and 300 concubines. And a concubine is just a lesser wife, however that plays out. So 1,000 wives. All right. The picture of the marital relationship and the intimacy there of the whole picture, that would be absolutely impossible for him with 1,000 wives. On my way here, I just kind of did a quick calculation while I was driving, and that means that if he were to visit each wife every night, each one, it would take him 2.73 years to get around to the other one again. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I would assume that the wife would not be happy to only see her husband every 2.73 years. Okay? And you sure can't build a relationship out of that. So the model of his life and what he writes here, kind of two different things. Okay? But he became the wisest man on the earth. God gave him that. God's letting him write this story. Okay? It becomes Scripture. Okay? Now here's a couple of other interesting things that I found in this thing. There's Origen and Jerome. They were both first century Christian theologians, 100, 200 year range AD. And both of them made some statements about the Song of Solomon. And they stated that at times in Jewish history, they never debated whether this was scripture, but they did in times, there were times that they wouldn't let men read this book until they were 30. Now by then, the men had already gotten married. You know, some of this stuff shouldn't have been a real surprise, but I think it was because of the visual of some of this. Okay? And look, I remember 10, 11, 12 years old reading this stuff. You know, I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough. Okay? So it's one of those books that's kind of challenging. Okay? And it's even weirder when you're fixing to go teach on it, but I made myself a promise a long time ago that I would be willing to teach on anything. And I've done about some weird things I got on topics for. And this one's no different because, like I said, I know I'm not talking to junior high girls and boys, okay, when I'm talking about this stuff. So, with that said, let's jump in. How about that? All right. Song of Solomon, chapter 1. And we're not going to cover all these chapters. We're going to cover kind of a basic, get through some of these. Chapter 1, when you look at this, you have to almost look at, you got to look at it in sections to kind of see what's going on here in them. All right, and chapter 1 here is, I think, Shulamite. And she names herself Shulamite, but then she's also, it talks about maybe she's a Shulamite, like from, so we're just going to eliminate Shulamite's her name, okay? Because it never, other than that, tells us. The other people involved is, well, Solomon, and then the narrator, and the narrator is Solomon, but sometimes he's like any other author. He's writing, one hears me, and one hears me as narrator, okay? But I think what you've got here in chapter 1 is, this is kind of down the road. They've already gotten married, okay? And so remember, this is not just chronological. So thinking back, y'all been in relationships before since the time you're a kid. You know, you kind of, when you were young, you thought forward, right? Now you can look and you can kind of think back to those. Whether it was, okay, what did I do to mess it up, or what worked well? You can kind of think back. So that's what I think she's doing here. This is kind of looking back in time. Look at chapter 1, verse, the end of verse 4. Under the heading there, woman, it says, "It is only right that they adore you." Okay? What is she talking about? Well, this is Shulamite. I think what she's doing is she's thinking. And when you look at the rest of her answer here, she's kind of thinking back in time, and she's kind of got in her own mind. Y'all ever got in your own mind? Okay? Problem with your own mind is, well, you're playing your own movie, right? You're the star of your own movie. But what happens with everybody else? They're playing their own movie and they're the star of their own movie, right? She's, I think, thinking in her mind. And look what she's thinking. Verse 5. "Daughters of Jerusalem, I am dark like the tents of Kedar, yet lovely like the curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I'm dark, for the sun has gazed on me." She's thinking what? People are looking at her because she's what? She's dark. Okay? Now, she's going to go on and tell us why she's dark. But in her mind, I think she's sitting back and she's thinking. Okay? And look, I read Facebook. Okay? I see these things. I watch, I listen to everybody. And some of y'all are laughing because you know exactly what I'm talking about. You can tell when sometimes nobody's saying certain things about people. But in their mind, they're thinking people are, and what do? They react in their mind. They're thinking what? These people are talking about me, and here's what they're saying. I think that's what she's doing. She's looking and going, okay, people are talking about me, and here's because I'm dark. Okay? And so now what's she going to do? She's going to say why she's dark. Look at what she says. Do not stare at me because I'm dark, for the sun has gazed on me. My mother's sons were angry with me, and they made me take care of the vineyard. Looks like probably father's died. She's at home with her brothers growing up, and they've got a vineyard, and looks like, and later on in these chapters you'll see, it looks like that they were probably tenant farmers, if you will, and who was the one that owned the farm? Looks like it's Solomon, okay? But they're making their sister, they're angry at her, they don't like her, whatever, and they're making her go out and work in the sun. Why is that a problem? Well, unlike our day, people pay good money to get what? Tan, okay? It's seen as what? It's seen kind of as a status type thing, right? That's looked on well in our day, but in their day, it wasn't. Their day, you would be, if you wanted to be kind of in a higher social class and you didn't get touched by the sun. You kept covered up. You stayed inside. You wanted your skin to be as pure and clean, all right? And the sun over time does what to skin? It kind of makes it like leather, right? So she's sitting here saying, the reason I'm dark like this is because I wasn't taken care of like that. I was made to go out and work. And look, we're talking the Middle East. It gets hot, okay? It's real hot out there. So she's saying, here's what it is. And then she says, the next part of it says, I have not taken care of my own garden, okay? Our own vineyard. What's she talking about? She's not talking about the vineyard itself. Now she's talking about herself. Because she had been out working and she had been doing this, she did not, like other women, get to take care of herself and pamper herself and stay out of the sun and those type of things that would have made her attractive in that day. She didn't get that opportunity. She was tanned out by the sun. She was dark because of it. And then look at verse 7. She says, tell me, you whom I love, where do you pasture your sheep? Where do you let them rest at noon? Why should I be like the one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions? She's thinking back when she's first met Solomon. She's thinking back way back then. Y'all remember relationships when you first met somebody? You think about them later, you're thinking back. She's thinking back. At this point, he was a shepherd. He had sheep around somewhere, okay? And then there's an answer. If you do not know, most beautiful of women, follow the tracks of the flock. Okay? And pasture your goats near the shepherd's tents. I compare you, my darling, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. Look, I do think it's funny sometimes the comparisons here. If you said some of these things to women now, that guy would probably get slapped, right? But you got to put yourself in context of where this is. All right, look, a mare among patriots. Let's put it in today's comparison. Horses weren't exactly normal for just anybody. Okay, so those were chariots. They were pulling chariots. Those were for war. Those were status symbol. So put it in our day, it'd be like one of the old vans versus a Ferrari. Okay, she's being compared to a Ferrari, not an old van. Okay, make sense? All right. So he's telling her how beautiful she is. She's in her mind, she's thinking back how dark I am, unattractive I am, and he's saying what? No, you're beautiful. Okay? And look, guys say all kinds of stuff when they're in love and it's the beginning of stuff. Okay? But I think Solomon's telling the truth here. Okay? She's very beautiful. He's telling all this. Now, then they go back to kind of the current situation. Look at verse 15. He says, how beautiful are you, my darling? How beautiful. Your eyes are like doves. And she says, how handsome you are, my love. How delightful. Our bed is verdant. And I looked that up, and it was basically talking about that it's the blossom, that the trees. And so I think what this means is it's based on that, the beams of the house are cedars. They're married, and it's just kind of a picture, kind of floral. They're married. It's the bedroom. It's not just basic. Makes sense? I hope. All right. But this is back, they're back, she's thinking back, she's now popped back into the current. Okay. And this is them being married. Now, so love, she's thinking back through, love's building up, and then all of a sudden she's back and okay, I'm back here in the current. Okay. They're back to life. Yeah, back to the married life. Now, chapter 2. Chapter 2 seems to be looking back to the pre-marriage courtship or dating years, or dating days. Y'all remember those days, right? There, curiosity, love's in the air, right? She's beautiful, he's a stud, you know, all those type things. You're going to see that here. Look at some of these. I'm just going to kind of go down. Look at chapter 2. Chapter 2, verse 2. Like a lily among thorns, so is my darling among the young women. Right? Look at the end of verse 3. I delight to sit in his shade, and his fruit is sweet to my taste. I mean, this is talking about what? Coming in, and this is still pre-marriage days, and so it's about comfort and peace and provision. And let's face it, she is dating who? The king. Okay? So, provision, comfort, and peace. And then look at verse 7, though. I tell you what, go back to verse 6. May his left hand be under my head and his right arm embrace me. Young women of Jerusalem, I charge you, by the gazelles and the wild does of the field, do not stir up or awaken love until the appropriate time. Now you start to get into the little nuts and bolts of this thing. Okay. They're in those dating years, those early years. Okay. And like I said, that whole thing, she's beautiful, he's a stud. I'll tell you what, look down here. I even marked it right here. Look at verse 9. My love is like a gazelle. Talking about Solomon, or a young stag. All right. She's beautiful, he's a stud. It's that infatuation. Okay. Those type things are going on here. But she's looking back in time. She's married. They're in that married relationship. And what's she doing? She's looking back, and now she's saying to who? The young women of Jerusalem, the girls of Israel. And what's she telling them? Don't stir up or awaken love until what? The appropriate time. Because look, it's not hard to move right on past. And she's giving a warning on what? Don't do that. Okay? Before the appropriate, not just the I want it times, the appropriate time. Okay? So this is somebody with wisdom that's looking back and saying, you know what? It's better if you wait to what God said is the appropriate time. And she's telling the people this. And then look down at verse 10. My love calls to me, arise, my darling. Come away, my beautiful one. Arise, come on. Okay? And then look at the end of verse 13. He tells her again, arise, my darling. Come away, my beautiful one. This is pre-married days. Okay? And he says, verse 14, my dove in the cleft of the rock, in the crevices of the cliffs. Let me see your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. Things are heating up. Okay? They're heating up. And what? What's happening? The potential for what? Passion is right there. And here's the guy. Look, I'm a guy. I know how this works. Okay? I told Rebecca here recently, all boys at that age are liars. How do I know that? I was one. Okay? Passion, right? And he's, what? It's starting to build up, and looks like that he's going, come on. And look what she says, verse 15. This is Shulamite. Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards. Who's the vineyard? She is. She's the vineyard. Okay? For the vineyard are in the bloom. catch the foxes for us, even the little foxes. So I went and looked this up a little bit. The foxes, so the grapes, Jerusalem, what they used to do when they had the grapes out there, they didn't, y'all seen them now, people have the vines and they're up off and they keep them up on these trellises and they're up. Well, back then they didn't do that. They would go across the ground. And so you had to keep the foxes out, especially the little foxes, because they get all crawling up all up in there and they destroy the vines and the vineyard. So how do you don't just have to worry about the big ones, because the big ones are easy. It's the little ones. Okay? What's she talking about here? She's talking about, well, I mean, for the moment she's talking about, well, sex. The little things. The vineyard. The little foxes. Don't let it mess up the vineyard, because she's what? She's looking forward. And look, he's done the same thing. Okay? They're looking forward, but you know how passion hits. Okay? And so they're looking at this, and she's telling him, hold up, big boy, slow down. Okay? The little foxes will destroy you. Okay? The heat of the moment causes our brains to stop, that's for sure. So even in those little things. Now, little foxes aren't just sexual in nature. Little foxes, especially when you get into marriage and the romance side of things, there's a lot of little foxes that can come in. Okay? Things such as attitude, anger, selfishness, lack of grace, unforgiveness, money problems, vision of what the marriage should look like. See, everybody's kind of got in their mind what the vision should look like. Here's what my marriage should look like. The problem is that the other person doesn't understand or know that. That can cause a little fox to start messing up the vineyard. Okay? Power trips. Somebody smothering somebody. Flip side of that, lack of attention. All those things can be what? Little bitty foxes that start to mess up the whole romance of what God says is husband and wife, enjoy, but all these little foxes. So in this case, it can go beyond just the little foxes that happening right here. Hey, Solomon, slow down. Let's don't let the foxes mess this thing up. But there are other foxes, little foxes over time that come into this. Now, chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. That section there, I looked it up and did some kind of research. I think I agree with, not that he cares, but I think I agree with John MacArthur on this one. Some people had some different thoughts. I think it's a dream. I think she's thinking back. This is a time before they're married. She's where? She's at her mama's house. Okay? She's at home. And she's having a dream about, lover boy. About future husband. Okay? She's having a dream about him. And so in this dream, she can't find him, and she's in her dream. She goes out, but when she wakes up, what does she feel? She realizes that she's in her mother's house, okay, where she's supposed to be. She's in there, and she's still remaining pure, okay? And at the end of that, she says, in the last of verse 5 again, do not stir up or awaken love until the appropriate time. Look, here's the other thing. Once you awaken that thing, it's hard to get that back in the box. Okay? This is a fun topic. Once you do that, okay? If you've been married before, not married now, and you start dating somebody, it's hard to keep that in the box. Okay? It's already been stirred up. And so she's thinking, and she wakes up from this dream, and what's her thought process again? Don't stir that up until the appropriate time. Okay? Now, starting in verse 6 there, thankfully, it's the wedding day. I don't know, maybe that's not thankfully at this moment. It's the wedding day. Okay? Look at verse 6. Who is this coming from the wilderness like a column of smoke? Okay? Who's this coming? Look over at verse 7. Look, Solomon's bed. Some of them have that his sofa. surrounded by 60 warriors from the mighty men of Israel, all of them skilled with swords, trained in warfare. Each has his sword by his side to guard against the terror of the night. His bed or his couch. See, the king would be going somewhere, and his entourage, his royal guard would be with him, okay, protecting him. And he would normally have one chair, his throne that he'd be sitting on. He ain't got a throne this time. He's got what? He got room for somebody else. Okay? He's come where? He's coming to get his bride. Now, Jewish, the way this used to be done, and you can remember there's even a parable Jesus talks about the bride being ready. You don't know what time the groom's gonna come, right? So the groom they'd have all this planned out, and the groom would what? He comes and he gets his bride and he takes her home. Here's Solomon. He's coming now to get his bride. It's wedding day. And he shows up for this. Okay? There's room for two when he shows up. And then look down at verse 11. Go out among the young women of Zion and gaze at King Solomon. Here comes King Solomon, wearing the crown his mother placed on him on the day of his wedding. Here's wedding day. And that morning he gets up, he's got everything ready, he's got his men ready, he's fixing to go head off to go get his bride, and mama comes out and what? Puts the crown on his head. Okay? And he goes to pick up his bride. On his wedding day, the day his heart's rejoicing. Chapter 4, just marked a few of these nice little comparisons here. Your hair is like a flock of goats. CC, would that be romantic hearing that from somebody? No, it wouldn't, would it? In that day, apparently that would have been perfect. Or verse 2 here, your teeth are like a flock of newly shorn sheep. Pretty smile, they look like sheep. Right? But remember the time that we're talking about. Verse 3, your brow is like a slice of pomegranate. Your forehead is like a slice of pomegranate there. Okay? Or your neck is like a tower. I mean, the only thing you can think of there, what? You got a long neck. Again, it's the time we're dealing with. Okay? Then look over at verse 9. You have captured my heart, my sister, my bride. You have captured my heart with one glance of your eyes. Okay? This is wedding day. This is moving beyond all that pre-stuff. Hey, keep the foxes away. Hold off. But now we're what? We're at the wedding day. And then look at verse 12. My sister, my bride, you are a locked garden and sealed springs. This is her body. Okay? The garden. Okay? That she didn't let the little foxes get in, right? Saved it for what? Wedding day. Okay? And then verse 15, you are a garden spring of a well of flowing water, streams from Lebanon. And then verse 16, awaken north wind, come south wind, blow on my garden. Skip down one verse or one line and says, let my love come to his garden and eat choicest fruits. The benefits of what? Appropriately timed. Come and enjoy. This is the wedding day. Okay? Just as what? As God had designed it. Who designed the first one? God, right? Garden of Eden, chapter 2. God put what? Adam to sleep after he realized that what? There ain't no other one to like me. Put him to sleep. Takes a rib. Makes a woman. And then who brings her to the man? God escorts her to the man. Brings and puts them together. Okay? And they live in that relationship until what? Sin. Okay? Until sin. But they're looking at this and, hey, enjoy now. The wedding. Okay? But they can enjoy now even more because what? They didn't let the little foxes in. Again, I get it. That's difficult, especially if you've already been there once. Okay? It's difficult. But we're looking at what God says. Look at chapter 5, verse 1 there. I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. I gather my myrrh with my spices. I eat my honeycomb with honey. I drink wine with my milk. This is the two of them, what? Consummating the marriage. Okay? But this is their wedding. And then the narrator says, eat, friends, drink, be intoxicated with caresses. Okay? Enjoy it. Okay? And the idea here is what? Drunk? I mean, what? Excess. Enjoy. You've waited this long. But you did it where? Where God says enjoy. Okay? So, basically, I wrote here, romance gets unleashed at this point, right? Okay? They held off. They did it God's way. Okay? Now, chapter 5, starting there in verse 2, right there, I marked this out. This is the ebb and flow of romance, if you will. This is life. You know, the honeymoon does end, right? You don't stay at that point forever. Life gets going, right? The ebbs and flows of marriage life and romance. I mean, real life happens. Just the reality of it. Whether it's kids, jobs, you name it. Okay? It happens. And what usually happens, there's cycles, right? There's ups and downs. There's times. Okay? And I think that's what this is looking at here. And I think what you've got is a time. Well, let's read verse 2. I was sleeping, but my heart was awake. A sound, my love was knocking. Man, open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is drenched with dew, my hair is droplets of the night. He's come to see his wife. Okay? And here's her first answer. Verse 3. I have taken off my clothing. How can I put it back on? I've washed my feet. How can I get them dirty? In modern English, I got a headache. Okay? Leave me alone. I got a headache. Don't touch me. Okay? That's a far cry from the last few things that we've talked about, right? Okay? That explosion of passion has come and what? It's hit a down spot. And so she's kind of like, yeah, I got a headache, don't bother me. Not interested. Maybe they've had some arguments, maybe they had some disagreement, whatever it is. Okay? And they happen, right? It's part of the marriage process. That's part of all of it. And so she's got that. But then what happens? Look, guys, we're different than girls. Okay? Especially in this arena. Okay? Look, we get over things real fast. And we don't think about them very long. Flip side, y'all will remember them for a long, long time. Okay? So he's coming over there and he's kind of knocked at the door and she's like, leave me alone. Okay? He's kind of tried a couple times and nothing's happened. Okay? My love thrust his hand through the opening and my feelings were stirred for him. All of a sudden, what? Okay. Feelings have started to change a little bit. Okay? And I rose to open for my love. My hands dripped with myrrh. My fingers flowed with myrrh on the handles of the bowl. I opened to my love, but my love had turned and gone away. He was kind of shut down for a while, and he did what? He finally went away. She got up, and then what? He's not there. Okay? I think this is why in the New Testament, 1 Corinthians 7:5 talks about don't deprive one another. Okay? Because what happens is he eventually gives rise to little foxes. Okay? And you got to be real careful there. Now, I've taught on this one before, but you got to also know the difference between wants and needs. Okay? Because everybody's got a want level, but there's actually a need level. Okay? But don't deprive one another. And so you got to be careful with those type of things inside what? The appropriate time, the appropriate context. Okay? Now, what's going to happen here? She says, verse 6, I opened to my love had turned and gone away. My heart sank because he had left. I sought him, but I did not find him. I called him, he did not answer. Okay, so he's gone. Now, it doesn't mean he's gone, but he ain't there at the door no more. Okay. So you gotta be careful with even those things. Again, those come back to the little foxes. You've got those ups and downs. Okay? But those little foxes that you sometimes don't pay attention to can jump in there. Okay? And you got to handle those things. Now, chapter 8, real quick. Chapter 8. Chapter 8's another one that I think is looking back to the early pre-marriage dating years. Okay? And let's just look at the first, starting right there, 8 verse 1. If only I could treat you like my brother, one who nursed at my mother's breast. I would find you in public and kiss you, and no one would scorn me. She's looking back to a time, and she's thinking back. See, that would have been really inappropriate in her day to go out and here's the man she loves, but she ain't married to him, to go and what? Hug him like he's a family member and kiss on him. Couldn't do that. Okay? So she's thinking back to those periods of time. Okay? Verse 2, I would lead you and I would take you to the house of my mother who taught me I would give you spiced wine to drink from the juice of my pomegranate. And then she's looking back and she's thinking, and she says, may his left hand be under my head and his right arm embrace me. What is that? It's a picture, right? Of embrace. But then she says again, young women of Jerusalem, I charge you, do not stir up or awaken love until the appropriate time. Think about that if you want. Nothing wrong with that. But what? Don't awaken it until the proper time. All that's good in the proper time, in the proper context. Okay? So, we've all been there in those younger days, dreaming of romance and passion, all those type things. But the advice to don't stir up, don't awaken that until God has ordained the right time for that. Okay, I think it's good advice she's given. I think that's good advice to us. And again, I know I'm not talking to teenage girls. Okay, and tomorrow I will be talking to teenage boys. But it doesn't change the fact that the truth of Scripture is still there. Okay, don't stir that up. Now we've had talks. I've had talks across the spectrum for years. You know what? I want people to come through here and get re-engaged and date people and get married. And hey, you know what? I'd rather a lot of people go out here, graduate, get married, go get jobs, and send back donations. Okay? Hey, yeah. You need people that do that. You need people that stay and work. But at the same time, I also know that what? That marriage is a picture of the gospel. Okay? And young love waiting for the proper time to enjoy and explore the beauty of the garden, that's important, okay? But it's got to be done in the proper time and context, okay? Now, enjoying the intimacy of the husband and wife relationship is to become one. That's really over a long haul. It's a long period of time, okay? Now, also in the New Testament, that's a New Testament or New Covenant picture of husband and wife relationship is what? Christ and the church. And really it's also a picture of our personal walk with our Savior. Okay? Not everyone can enter the Holy of Holies. All right? Who's the only people that can enter the Holy of Holies? Well, in today's, those that have been what? Saved. You got the blood of Christ, you can walk into the throne room of God, the Holy of Holies. But not just anybody can. Okay? If you look, some of them were calling this the Holy of Holies book of the Old Testament. Why? Because it's showing what? The husband and wife's relationship. Ain't nobody supposed to walk in there but the ones that are what? Supposed to be there. No outsiders coming in. Okay? Nobody enters that wedded garden but the bride and the groom. Okay? And then that private lot garden's reserved for the appropriate time. Okay? Now, marriage is sacred, God-given institution. The relationship that's shown here shows a satisfied and a devoted husband and wife relationship. Again, while that's the picture that's shown here, that's not Solomon's outcome himself. But God's the one that instituted marriage. He's the one that gets to determine what it is. Okay? But here's the deal. Media, TV, music, social media stuff, marketing. Marketing is geared toward, well, sex sells. Okay? And many things are geared toward what? Toward love. And they really don't mean love. They really mean what? Sex. These days, I mean, let's just be honest. These days, it's almost expected somebody goes out on the first date, okay, the second or third date, it's kind of expected that, oh, they're going to all jump in the bed together. It's just reality of the world we live in. Now, who's behind all that? Satan. Why? Anything God said was good, Satan has done his best to destroy. And he's done a really good job with marriage. Okay? In destroying what it's supposed to be. But the reality is God's like, don't feed those pleasures. And that's what Shulamite's saying here. Don't feed those pleasures for that one quick moment. Okay? But nurture and grow the garden. Okay? Relationships start, look, we all get it, passion and all those things happen, right? But relationships start and they build, but they're not about just that one little thing. The whole romantic, intimate relationship is the whole package. And it's built over getting to know each other, what? Over a lifetime. Okay? It kind of sounds like what? Our personal relationship with Christ would look like, right? Now, in the context of the day that this was written, it was a reflection of Yahweh, God of Israel, and his people. Because God told them through Moses and others, through the prophets, to don't prostitute yourselves. Okay? And what was he doing? He was using that with idols, and he's using that as a picture of marital prostitution or marital cheating. He was using the same thing because they were supposed to be what? Wedded to their God. Okay? And so what do you got? The marriage picture is a picture in that context of that day of what? Israel and God. It was a sacred relationship, and idolatry in Israel was compared to marital unfaithfulness. But then how about Christ and the church? Get to the New Testament side. This story reflects that. The New Testament revelation that the church is the bride. And who's the bridegroom? Jesus is the bridegroom. And you remember it tells us the same thing that Solomon did. That one of these days the bride's supposed to be ready because what? One of these days the bridegroom's coming. Okay? We got the bridegroom going to come back. And then take the individual side of that. If you're in the church, if you're in the body of Christ, the individual side of that, okay, the individual believer in an intimate communion with who? Our Savior. Marriage is a picture of the gospel. Why do we fight so hard for the definition of marriage? Because of that. It's a picture of the gospel. Okay? Personal relationship, one-on-one, not rule on rule, but one-on-one. Okay? Now, God does tell us what is the correct actions for holiness. All right? But He's trying to do what? Bring us to the garden of God. Just like in the marriage picture. Okay? You put off all the stuff that you're not supposed to have in there, what happens? When you get into the garden, it's good. When you get into the marriage with God, when it's a one-on-one relationship, He's bringing you where? Into the garden of God. Guess what happens when it's just you and God? It's pretty intense. Okay? It's pretty intense. It's a good relationship. But we have to be what? Willing to put off those worldly, sinful things that God says, hey, that's got to be outside. That's got to be out of here. Okay? So what are some of the things, though, that mess up our intimacy with God? Those little foxes? What you're watching on TV? I'd rather read a book most of the time. Okay, well, let me put that here. What you're reading? Catch myself there. Okay. What you're reading? That's important. Because where does everything start? It's all in the where? It starts right here in the mind. Battle's in the mind. Okay? Or where do you go? That can get you. That can mess up your intimacy with the Lord. Okay? Who you hanging with? Okay? Got to be careful with all those type of things because they bring the foxes in. Now, we're looking at the Song of Solomon. Why do I bring all this up? Again, I'm going to go back and tell you. Look, people get here broken. Look, I get it. There's lots of baggage, lots of things that have happened, but God's able to what? Restore the years the locusts have eaten. Okay? Satan's done his best to mess all this up, but the reality is God is there with open arms to forgive, but it's not cheap grace. It's not, hey, forgive me and then let me go right back to it. And again, once you've already opened that door, it's real, real hard to not until it's the appropriate time. And I'm going to challenge all of us to be real careful there, okay? Because, well, I've said along the way, drug side of this is easy to catch. The drug test will catch it. But on the flip side, I can't read your mind. I can't do a test to read your mind. Okay? When you get to the sexual side of stuff, you can't read your mind. Okay? That's just between what? You and God. And look, do you really want your mama knowing what you think? I don't want my mama knowing what I thought lots of times. Okay? But God knows what? All of it. And it starts here. Okay? It starts right here. Okay? But as he said, guard for the little foxes. And you got to do that. You got to plan that out. And you got to do that what? Before you get to that situation. Because if you wait till the situation, guess what? Crash and burn. Every time. You've got to put that into place beforehand. Okay? Especially when it comes to this type of stuff. Okay? All right. Thanks.